Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Color Commentary, colorful conversations by colorful people about Christianity, culture, and race. I am one of your hosts, Markus, Lloyd, and with me, as always, is Mr. Antwuan. What's happening, Antwuan?
Yo, boys and girls.
Boys and girls.
Ladies and gentle people.
Children of all ages. Welcome
Ladies
to the show.
and gentle people. So Lisa does not like...
Which Lisa?
My Lisa, okay. My wife Lisa. Good. I enjoy a good bit of Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny.
Of course you would, yeah.
I still will go in and look at it because maybe it's probably nostalgia.
Sure, and it's just good,
and it's silly, but Lisa, she is so out on Looney Tunes. So I bring that up because I say, ladies and gentle peoples. That was like the magician on one of the Bugs Bunny things, and it's just a thing that has stuck, and he had a little accent. I don't know where the accent was supposed to be from.
Can you give us a little?
And the gentle people.
Oh, okay. That's the accent. Was that your version of the accent?
Yeah, it was terrible. But still, in case you guys want to use that later for you Gen X people.
Ladies and gentle
gentle
Look, I love me some Looney Tunes. I grew up on that.
Man. She doesn't like that so much of Looney Tunes has to do with pain, like that all the funny stuff is that Bugs Bunny, you hit him or you blow him up or you shoot him in the face.
Sure.
And she's like, I don't know why that's so funny to people. She doesn't like America's Funniest Home Videos when they have that kind of stuff on it too. Like she doesn't like to laugh when people fall. Like
okay, she's nice.
She's on that. She's on that, which I'm sure there's people in the room.
Yeah,
and it causes me to feel judged because
you like explosions and pain of other
it's
people.
Hilarious to me when someone is trying their best not to fall and then finally fall.
Right. And they take forever.
Bro, one of the funniest videos ever is this dude trying not to fall while he's on this ice. That thing lasts for like 15 seconds. He's just trying his best to stay on his feet. Man, that's hilarious to me, but she is not.
Well, that's one of my favorite Instagram videos. It gets sent to me all the time. It's like these series of falls that people have, and there's this one where this dude is coming out of his house. You know, it's those ring phone camera vision. Coming out of his house, he's good. He's got to be probably, I don't know, maybe in his late 60s, maybe early 70s. So it's not as funny when you put him in that age bracket.
True.
All right, I'll put him in his 50s.
Yeah,
he was 30 years old, and he was going down, and he took. If he had, let's just say his front yard was 20 yards. This dude took 20 yards to fall. And I was just yelling at him while you watch the video. Just fall.
Just give it up.
Fall. Like, this is the problem with being an adult, is we have forgotten that it's okay. You know what I mean? Like kids, they would be like, I fell, and they roll and they feel good.
After 3 seconds, you committed, man. I gotta win now. I gotta stay up.
Gotta stay up.
We're
so scared to fall. I try to just roll around whenever I'm at the gym. I just try to roll around on the ground a little bit.
Do like Shaq. Shaq just go down voluntarily. Just roll. Just rolls down.
That's it. So we're growing up. You get older and that kind of stuff. Looney Tunes is fun. People falling down.
I don't know why it's funny actually when you really think about it.
What, people falling down?
Yeah, I don't know why that's funny, but and sometimes it's not. But sometimes
that mug is funny.
Sometimes it's hilarious.
I'm watching videos after videos of people falling.
I'll watch this dude if I ever find it. I'll watch this dude survive on this little piece of ice.
He's a little piece of ice. It's not like he's on like a lake, like a frozen lake.
It's one of those situations where he looks like he's about to recover,
and then
it's not quite.
And when it's coming,
it looks like he's about to do it, and he's like, he's got it. No.
I'll steady laugh.
Anyway, I'm sorry. It's hilarious for me. Anyway.
Well, look, I don't know how we got into Looney Tunes,
boys and girls.
Yes, that's
Gentle
what it is.
peoples.
That's how it starts. Yes. Well, speaking of Looney Tunes, this environment that we are in right now is Looney Tunes, right? And I keep thinking about
you got the cast of characters.
Oh man, everything
in
is
our
out there.
Culture right now.
Yeah, and I don't know. I keep trying to think through it. I find myself angry. I find myself sad. I mean, all the emotions. I go through them, and I know that from obviously, not obviously, but those who have been listening to Color Commentary a while know that we are powered by the organization Threaded, which is this faith-rooted, biblically based racial reconciliation and justice ministry, right? And so we're always looking at these things. That's why we talk about race and culture and things of that nature. We're always talking about that, but we deal a lot with the church. We deal a lot with church leaders, right? A lot of what we do is going into churches and trying to train staff and train leaders to know what does a discipleship process look like that includes thinking about this cultural piece that is a part of the mission of God, right? This reconciliation of all tribes and tongues and nation. How does that fit into the mission of a church, right? And so we're constantly talking to leaders, and so I constantly, when I see things going on, particularly in the world and the environment out in just kind of the spaces, I'm always like, man, I wonder how churches are doing with responding to these things and thinking about these things, And again, I was in church leadership for like 20 years, and I know you still are. I don't have to do and think about that every day like you do, but we're running into people who do. So I don't know. So I kind of feel.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it's got to be such an interesting time to. I mean, I'm not a senior pastor, but to be a senior pastor,
that senior leader who has to make those final decisions and everything,
and others who are in that senior leadership as you're trying to navigate this, because one of the things that's going on in our culture right now is that the pull to the edge of conversation and of ideology, the pull to the edges is so strong. Like you're either in or you're out. And
when you pull to the edge, whoever's on the opposite side
is in out. And so even if a pastor is properly not on the edges, which is, I think, is where for color commentary we would say you should not be, and for threaded,
that you shouldn't be on the edges.
That you should not be on the edges. That you should be in the middle. Like I would say that a lot of pastors just like, what do you do with that middle? How do you shepherd people on the edges?
Right, because you could be in a church and you have people on both sides of the edges. I would say,
and that's
I would say you used to be like that. I would imagine what I'm seeing right now, and particularly this year, is there is this siphoning out. Again, during COVID, during racial reckoning, all that stuff, we saw lots of exits from churches for one reason or another. But you still have people who are left in some churches, whether it be those who lean right or those who lean left, that are still there, kind of waiting. You know what I mean? It's not as many. But as it gets more and more divisive, I think from a political standpoint, particularly, I'm just seeing that churches are becoming more of the cliques that have to do with political movement as opposed to anything else. And so, but you still have some stragglers, right? So, we've talked about, I think we had Dr. Bach in here, and we talked about kind of this 1 through 6, and we talk about it 1 through 4. You got people who are all the way, the ones who are far into they don't want to have this conversation, they don't want to talk about this conversation, they don't even know if this conversation is real, it's a waste of time, right? People who we would articulate as even to the very edges. These folks are like, again, in the racial conversation, these are openly okay with talking about white supremacy to some extent. You know what I mean? They're still kind of like, I'm not sure slavery was a sin, that kind of stuff. And then white nationalists was like, hey, we need to create an American country that is predominantly a white space. And you're going to find Christians like that. So I know that maybe people who are listening to color commentary are probably not there, and they're probably like, surely nobody's really doing that. Oh, there are people out there. Look, the Ku Klux Klan considers himself to be a Christian organization.
Yeah.
Right. So let's just know that that's the edges of the ones. Right now, you're going to go 1 through 9, and you're going to be making your way towards a 2. And these folks, and as you do that, you're getting a little bit more into the conversation. You're becoming a little bit more okay with it. By the time you get to the 2s, these folks are kind of just, they're kind of empathetic, right? So the 1s would be wary. They're wary of the conversation. The 2s are empathetic to the conversation. As you go from the 2.0 to 2.9, people become more interested in the conversation, but you're still dealing with that 2. And most churches, I think, are full of 2s, maybe high 2s now or low 2s, but 2s are there. And then you kind of move to the 3s, which are the passionate about, the conversation of reconciliation. They like that terminology. Let's get people unified and together. And again, from the 3s to the 3.9s, you're getting a little bit more heading towards what would be the end, which is kind of a striving for justice, right? And so these folks are moving into a much more a justice conversation. And as you get to the edge of that conversation, that's particularly the Christian version of that conversation, there's a way in which that justice conversation even becomes, shutting people off who aren't with you, keeping people who just shutting, again, from the edges. They're all just looking at
well, even I would say with the edge on that one, like Christianity. Yeah, Christian principles are a little bit of an option.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right, because if you're on the edge, they're like, "Hey, I'll give up some of Christians from Jesus' principles to achieve this justice that I want to achieve." And so you do have do have those
holes, right?
Edges.
Yeah, so you got churches.
And so we're back at it, like
2s and 3s. it's just hard. Pastors are sitting there going, I got lots of twos, some low twos, but I also got some high threes who are moving towards more justice conversation. Mm-hmm. And so they got to manage that. But I see churches moving to more of like, I'm more of a 3-4 church, or I'm more of a 2-1 church. That's where I see it this year, kind of moving. So
yeah, and again, I think the people that we are, that I don't know that it's a 2 or 3. Let's see, they are going to be the vocal ones, but just like in society, it's the edge of 1 and the edge of 4 that are making the most noise and creating the most can create the most energy, right? Because on the edge you have high passion, high explosive energy potentially. Those are the ones who are like, hey, we gotta do this, right? In my opinion.
Yeah.
And so again, it comes back to, you're a leader, you're a Christian leader, you're a senior leader. You do have these edges in your body.
Yeah.
They're part of your flock. Some of them, pastors, if you're listening to it, you know who they are.
Yeah.
Right. And some of them are high contributors in volunteerism. They're high financial givers. They are longtime members. They have longevity with the church, and therefore some connection to that. They have relational equity in your church, where if they're upset, they'll take a bunch of people with them, right? And so all those things create fear for how you might lead the edges.
Yeah.
Because the question again is, how do you shepherd the edges in your flock? And I think for a lot of pastors, we just try to ignore the edges.
Okay.
Or we try to deal with them in email.
Like send it
only.
Okay.
Yeah. Get them in. Well, we'll wait for the email to come. We'll wait for them to say something. And then we just navigate it, to try to minimize the wreckage, as opposed to what I think the moment is requiring of us, maybe. And this is where you might disagree, but I wonder if the moment is requiring us to not worry so much about the outcome. I think we want to be kind. I think you want to shepherd these people as people, not as enemies or demons. And so I don't think you need to bring like this big aggressive voice, to the conversation. But I think what we're missing right now in our culture from the Christian voice is the right level of clarity around what is actually good. And the people who are speaking with the Christian voice are speaking from a place of desiring power or desiring position or nationalism or some other version of Christianity that isn't what a lot of people would say is Christianity. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I don't disagree. I think you can't worry about something you can't control.
True.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, I guess you can worry about it. We're free to worry about it, but you can't control it. So the best thing to do is, again, as we have these conversations, what does the Lord require of you, right? To do justice, love mercy, kindness, and walk humbly with your God, right? And that's where I think we got to be better about this conversation around justice, right? Is that there is a requirement that we would to do it, but there's a way in which we need to come with, yes, truth telling, but there's a humility that we have to recognize that we don't actually have all the answers, and so we need to try something different. But I'm thinking, if I'm a leader, like, there's probably a couple of things, and maybe if you're somebody who's in a church and you're a church leader, or you've got a church leader, this is where maybe this part of the podcast would be super helpful. Is because as we're out there kind of talking to people, we're kind of hearing regularly the same kinds of things. And so maybe we can talk about a couple of what I would say the fears that I think leaders are experiencing right now, some of the obstacles they have, maybe even in engaging this work a bit. And maybe we can give just a little bit of help to, like, what should you be thinking about? Here's some of the obstacles. What should you be trying to think about in the midst of that? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'll throw out as I'm thinking of them. I think one of the fears is this idea of, does this conversation around race and justice, is this truly a part of our mission as Bible people, right? Like, is it, am I drifting away from what I'm really supposed to be doing to engage this conversation, right? Like I've said it before, is this an elective to our work here, right? Our schooling, or is this core curriculum?
Yeah.
Right. I think that's where people probably are wrestling that. Are you
Yeah, I mean,
I've seen that,
experiencing and seeing it. It's easy to for a lot of people to the leaders to, when asking a question of what should we do about this, like, well, we're focused on these things, and that's over. That is something that needs to be dealt with, but it's kind of over here
on the side somewhere,
right? And we can't allow for that to distract us from our real work. Right. And that's from a macro point of view and from a micro point of view. That's maybe, and maybe you'll talk about this here in a little bit, but like, it's understanding maybe the mission of God and the mission of the church, big C as a whole, but also the mission of my church. Like, I have something we have something we're doing in my church that this conversation feels ancillary to. And so it would be scope creep in some way to overspend our time, energy, etc. in this space over here, right? And so we believe God has called us to do this thing, and so we're going to do this thing. And I think that you're right. I think that's one of the reasons. That's one of the ways. The answer to the question of how do I shepherd the edges in this area is I don't have to.
Because I'm working on something else.
Because that is a distraction to what it is I'm actually trying to shepherd them to. Which of course, you and I think would say that we would disagree with that. I believe that the fundamental goal of almost every church is discipleship of all nations in one form or another.
Sure.
And that has to consistently challenge the effort and the investment of the church's gifts, talents, and treasures on a regular basis, and that it includes how we shepherd, but also how we lead and how we construct the churches that we lead, and especially in a moment where the question about culture is so debated and lively, and where the stakes are so high from a political point of view.
Yeah, and I think that to me is where you said a lot of times, right? Like, I don't know if you say I'll say it and you can change it. Christianity is a context sport.
Yeah, ministry.
Right? Ministry is a context sport, right? So yes, I understand that you were going to do a series on worship, or you were going to do a series on transfiguration, right? I don't know, like whatever your series was, right? It's not to say that the things going on in the context have to take over and change. But what we would say is the things that are going on in the context actually have a connection, most likely, if you understand the mission of God, a connection to whatever you're probably talking about in your series, right? Like, you can't talk about discipleship. We're talking about discipleship right now. That's why we're not doing this. What are you discipling your people to do?
Yes.
Are you discipling them to engage in the community around them? Yes, we need them to be outreach focused. Okay, who is in their community?
Right.
Is it just people who look like them and who think like them and who have the same faith as them? No, absolutely not. Okay, so how are you discipling them, connecting with the different diverse community that they live in?
Right.
Are you spending any time, and how are you connecting that desire to engage with that diversity to the scriptures itself? Right. And that's going to be across even, or let's just say you're doing a series on worship. Okay. Whose version of worship? Right. Like, how do you know that the kind of ways in which you were talking about worship, is it hitting just a particular group of people who think about it? We know, we go to different churches all the time. People, quote unquote, worship musically in all kinds of different ways. How do you talk about that? It's not that you have to do the style, but how do you talk about the idea of what worship looks like and how people engage in worship in ways that really have cultural connections to how people think about stuff? Like, how do you do that? And again, if we're all supposed to worship together in Revelation 7:9 of all tribes, tongues, and nations, what's going on there that allows for all tribes, tongues, and nations to actually worship God together without a problem? Investigate that.
Yeah.
And then what does that look like for us today? Right. Like, I'm just using some examples.
Yeah.
But
and I know the allure there, that if I'm a leader listening to this, like because I'll tell my wife this all the time. I'm like, whatever, like, everything is important in Christianity, everything is important. So like whoever I'm talking to, when I'm just sitting in my office, whatever ministry they represent, like that's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's it.
In ministry, like it's hey, we gotta take care of our women. Women are the key to the church. We gotta take care of our men. The men are the key to the church. We gotta take care of the next generation. The next generation is the key to the church. We gotta take care of the vulnerable. The vulnerable God called us to. Like, so whoever it is, like, I can understand. I want to empathize with the leader's plight of hearing everyone's passion, ministry burden, passion, and being like, can we center all of it? And the answer is we probably can't center all of it. But I also think that one of a proper view of mission and discipleship is an all-encompassing view. And I don't think that, let me put it this way. What I see in the scripture is that Jesus is constantly balancing out his people, whether it's the Jews who are highly scriptural, but not very good socially or relationally, or whether he's dealing with someone who's great relationally, but they need to understand the theology and the scripture, and those who Paul writes to the scripture, the New Testament is written to God's people. Paul writes to those who are over prioritizing the spiritual gifts. He's like, if you don't have love, then you're missing it, right? But they did have these other things, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's Jesus writing to the 7 churches, this thing you have and this thing you lack. On a regular basis, the Bible does not allow us to leave these things out on the edges.
That's right.
Right? And so when he's writing to your church, he may say to you, whatever it is that you believe your core thing is, he may say to you, hey, these things you're doing all right, but this thing you lack, because the end game is that the whole man is affected by the discipleship life and the missional life of described by Christianity, and that Jesus and our discipleship to him is designed to it's designed to permeate the entirety of who we are, not just as individuals, but as a church, if you will, as your church family, your individual church expression as the church. And that expression is not meant to stay inside the church, but is meant to express itself outside to the nations, whether it's locally, Jerusalem, or externally to the uttermost parts of the world,
or to the people you don't like,
or
Samaria,
somewhere in the Samaritans, the people that are not in your that are infamiliar to you. No. So it's going to be very difficult for this conversation. It feels like, man, it can't be. It's got to be part of the core curriculum, and you have to. And again, to the context of ministry, it's being a context sport. The culture is asking this question.
That's right, constantly.
This is the question that is before the church. What will we do with our power? What will we do with the injustice around us? And you've got people who are offering an answer on a megaphone that you don't agree with, that we wouldn't do. And I do think I think it's time for a lot of pastors to allow this to be something that we are willing to wrestle with internally, and then also speak into and see as a part of our mission statements.
Yeah, which I think is good. And let's just give the benefit of the doubt. Maybe you're a pastor and you've got a leader, you've got a pastor who's like, I'm in on all that, right? Yeah. Like, I'm all in. I want to do it. Another place that I think I find people wrestling or having an obstacle, particularly if they're like, yes, I'm in on that, is how do I do it?
Yeah.
Right? How do I kind of help disciple my folks? How do we practice this as a church? Like, what does that look like? And so I think that's a question that's super helpful, or a question that's being asked a lot. And I would say, like, there's lots of people who are working on this right now. And so one of the things that we talk about is there's usually kind of 3 major modes that we need to be continually working in if we're going to be pursuing this effectively. And this is good for leaders. This is good for any individual. Like, if you're going to be in this conversation, there's 3 modes that you're working with. There's some kind of space in which you've got to learn more about what it is that you're actually starting to engage in. Because clearly there's just a lot of things that we don't know. And it's hard because we see people who are taking away things. They're taking away information for you to grab. But you've got to understand not only like the history of this conversation, because what you just said, Antwuan, is like, this is the idea of disunity and divide across cultures has been a part of the church conversation since Pentecost, right? Like, it's literally almost every book of the New Testament is dealing with this conversation
Ephesus,
around
Corinth,
absolutely.
Colossians. Yes.
So do not think that this is like some new thing. Like, we've got thousands of years of research, if you will, on what this looks like and what happens when people go a particular direction in one way or another. And we've got lots of things from a biblical perspective that we can do, but we have to be reoriented, because the only reason we can allow this divide to exist in the midst of our work right now is that we have not really spent a lot of time theologically understanding what unity actually means and what it looks like. How do we model the Trinity's unity in diversity, right?
Yeah, and how do we truly create environments that actually lead, that actually facilitate and ferment unity, right?
Because unity, period, and then obviously cross-cultural unity is a huge thing. Yeah,
right. Like the leadership question, right? Is the leadership question is, how do you're leading an environment, right? And in my opinion, the leadership question is, not only do I personally need to understand unity, I need to lead and create an environment where unity is likely. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Like where the outcomes are catalytic to unity. That's the leader question, right? Yeah. The individual question gets to be something different. It gets to be, man, what's in the way of my ability to unite with other people and live in unity with others? The leader has to figure out what it means to lead people to unity, to the pool of unity to drink from, and also live into that. How do you have a culture of unity in your church, right?
Yeah,
we talked about it before. Like, how do you create a division-proof church, right? Yeah. And that's a leader question.
Yeah,
that's not just an individual,
right? But the individual, I think if the leader herself has to actually be thinking about that too, for herself, right? Like, what is it that's the obstacle for me? And discovering what's the obstacle for you helps you also think of what's the obstacle for that person, that person, that 100%, person, right?
It does do both,
right? Yeah. That's not to say the one or the other, but the idea is you've got to start actually learning, like, what is it that has kept us divided? What is making us divided, right? And that's going to think through both interpersonally, like what's keeping me from moving towards unity, but also trying to understand what's keeping this other group from maybe wanting to engage too. Right. And that's a big question. And it's one that people, they don't take the time to really wrestle with, to think of the other group. Like, why are they struggling maybe with coming? What is it about me that makes that group struggle with wanting to be unified?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where you got to do some reading, you got to do some education, right? Like for Threaded, we talk a lot about cultural intelligence training. We partner with a group called Let's Talk Race that has that conversation. We create curriculum that starts to build on, what is the background of cultural conflict. There's all these things, right? So you got to learn and even think about history to learn, like, what is the history of this division, right? I said it before, like, if you want to go start a church over in Gaza and you don't know the history of Palestinians and Jews, like, you're going to be at the
tone deaf at the very worst.
At the very worst, you're going to be tone deaf. At the very least, at the very worst, you might not make it through the day. You know what I'm saying? Sure. So I think that's a place you got to learn, right? I think the second piece is you've actually got to, and what learning does is it puts you in a position where you may be able to engage in proximity with people. Like, you got to put yourself in proximity with people who are different than you to be able to really understand, like, what's going on. And so there's a relationship building component, right? There's a learning component and there's a relationship building component. And sometimes, you get into you say, I'm trying the relationship component, it's not working. Well, it's because you actually didn't do the learning piece. You didn't learn what are the cultural things that are different here that's making your conversation difficult. You didn't learn what the history of animus was for this community and why these people are responding to you in the way they did. And so you approach the relationship as if none of those things happen or none of those things matter.
Yeah.
This is why
the cultural traumas,
that's right,
the cultural triggers.
Yeah, it's
you're unaware of.
It's a mental reorientation that needs to be done so that you can come to the relationship building, the identifying with other people section, in a way that's going to create much more probability for you to have success in building that relationship, right? And that's a big piece that I think, again, the leadership question, I guess, for that is, am I creating a space where folks who are different from one another can actually learn and grow together? Like, am I creating that space? Is that the kind of church space I'm creating? Is those the kind of programs I'm creating, right? Is that the kind of experience when people show up to my place? Am I creating a space when people walk in that they go, not only am I welcome, but I'm wanted. Here.
Yeah.
Right.
And in addition to that, like, so I think all that is great. And that kind of deals with like the people to people side of things. A lot of that is how do you help people do it? But there is this theological, there's this kind of where we were at the beginning with the mission, but there is I wonder if you're a pastor listening to this, if you were to ask yourself really objectively, not as an evaluation of who you are, right, but like as just a analysis, which I know is really hard to do to do the one without the other sometimes, because it's my church, and so it'll be reflection. It's not a reflection of you, but as a leader, I wonder if you were to ask yourself, does our theology make room for this kind of thing? Because I think some of the reasons why these things don't exist in churches is because theologically, we actually don't think these things matter or are all that important. Again, it goes back to the mission thing. So the question is, part of your strategy is like, how do I do this? One of the reasons is, well, if your church doesn't think it's supposed to do this, there may be something wrong with the theology, or nothing wrong. Maybe there's some opportunity for growth and for expansion of God's love as it's experienced through your church and the theology that it chooses to live out of, right? That is producing. I happen to believe that discipleship with Jesus leads to an ever expanding locus of love. And so each year your circle of love, if you will, should be getting bigger and bigger, right? To include more and more people, right? If the church isn't doing that, if it not only is it not doing it, but if it's not a cultural artifact of your church to do that, right? Then you're going to be offended when Jesus leads you outside of your circle,
right?
Which he's going to do because you're following him, right?
And his followers go make disciples of all nations, right?
They're doing that because that's where he is going, right? And so if that's you're going to be limited, and so some of that has to do with what's the nitty gritties around that. Some of that has to do with how important is what does community mean? What does it mean to be in a biblical community? And sometimes people mix up community and friendship. Sometimes people mix up community and family, right? What does missional community mean? What does the scripture mean when it says missional community? What did we see in scripture when God's community came together, and what does loyalty and all those things? What are these things that the scripture calls us to when he's building a community? I think those are questions that a leader can ask of themselves, because people definitely come to church for community.
Sure.
And they are coming for my people. We'll say it. We'll say, hey, find your people.
Find your people.
Which doesn't sound like a very Christian thing to do. That actually sounds like a very social thing to do.
Yeah, agree. Right. Yeah, but we follow off to that.
I know we do it, but we do it. And what I'm saying is there's nothing. I was talking to someone about this week. There's nothing remarkable about finding your people.
Right. That's biblical, right? In church. Yeah. Anybody can love the person who's like that.
There's nothing remarkable about that. You finding people who are just like you can be done around the Cowboy game, around your favorite restaurant. Jesus just becomes the occasion for finding your people at that point. That's not what this is. That's different. We use the term, do life together, right? Yeah. These are phrases that we might need to further interrogate and explain what we mean when we say them, in order to create a culture that isn't inward focused, but that is externally focused.
Right.
Yes.
But if you don't take those phrases out and you interrogate them, then you're just going to keep using them. You're just going to keep remaking the wheel.
And now you're at the culture that. So now you're going to come in. I always use the movie theater and the soup kitchen, right? You go to the movie theater, and in the movie theater, your goal is to sit down and watch the movie. Someone asks you, and then you leave. Someone asks you to clean up after it's left. Someone asks you to serve somebody. You look at them funny because you're like, I came in this room as a customer to watch this movie. Y'all are supposed to be the one cleaning up the stuff. I'm not the one passing out stuff.
Right.
You go to a soup kitchen, and in the soup kitchen, you'll do, hey, what do you need me to do? They'll tell you anything. They give you a broom. They give you a towel.
Right.
They give you the bread to give. You're in. You're like, I'm in. I'll do whatever you want me to.
Understand the situation.
The difference is, yes, you understand the situation. And if you're attracting people to your church with a movie theater mentality, but then asking them
to work as
to participate in a soup kitchen way, you're going to get the same crazy looks that someone would give you when they ask you, when people try to engage you in a movie theater. You have to change the way you're talking about your environment to match the things that you're asking of that environment.
Right.
And that requires re-looking at what it is you're saying, what it is you're doing, these verbiages and things that you're saying, and what they may mean as it pertains to what it is you're trying to pull off.
Yeah, and that goes all the way back to the first thing we were talking about your mission, right? Like does your mission statement have enough room to include what God is asking for in the ways of this mission and the mission of God, right?
Yeah.
It should. It should be in some ways based on the mission of God, but we know people like to get real kitschy with their mission statements these days.
Sure.
So we talked about, again, one of the tensions is, okay, as we just mentioned, is this mission drift, right?
Yeah.
How do I do it, right? And we talked about how we do it. There's a learning, there's a relationship building that must happen. And what I would say is if you're building those relationships really well, that last part, which is kind of this, move and engagement in justice, right? Like just what we would call, planning, work together, collaborating for justice. If you are in proximity to people and they are experiencing injustice, you do not have to be coerced to now fight and engage with the injustices that they're experiencing. I see it with you. I see it with your kids, right? Like there's the proximity to my kids. If I see that my kid is being bullied at school or being treated unfairly by the principal or by the teacher, I don't have to wonder, okay, what do I do about this, right? Like I'm ready to go. Like I'm ready to engage because I am in proximity and I love this person. Same thing is true. Like Antwuan, the other day, Antwuan had a thing going on, right? And it was just like, it didn't take anything. It was like, yeah, Antwuan's doing like, yes, what do you need? I'm going to be in on this for whatever, right? Because he's my friend. He's in proximity. His people are my people, right? So we go that way. And that's the piece that we're missing a lot of times in this conversation is again, I'm finding your people, right? But we don't think about it in the term that Ruth would say it in when she's looking at a completely different ethnic group, a completely different people group. And she's saying, your people are my people.
Right.
Right. And that's what we have to get to the place in the church, recognizing, right, that particularly the family of God really encompasses all people made in his image, right?
It should.
All tribes, tongues, and nations.
We have done a great job of establishing that community and church is not that. We'll say that is that, but when it comes to actually making room for no more people, some of the hardest places to get to make space, some of the hardest work to make space for people is inside many churches, and that's one of the reasons a lot of people step away. They feel that they hear the verbiage, yes,
but they don't see it practiced out.
That sectionality that Paul writes about. He calls it dissensions. And many other places. Again, none of this is new.
Yeah.
Paul has been writing about this since the entry of the church, since the earliest stages.
Yeah, and I want to say one other thing to this idea of really engaging and gaining proximity and learning and building relationships, right? I think if there's plenty of people, if I'm a church leader right now and if I'm a person at the church, they'll say, well, I go to Uganda once a year, right? Like I'm engaging with people who are different than me. That's if you're Ugandan and you go to Uganda, you're not engaged with people who are different than you, right? But if you are not Ugandan and you go to Uganda, that's where people will say, this is how I'm doing it. I'm not talking about engaging people who you will never engage with again. I'm talking about the neighbor who's from Uganda, right? Are you engaging in that capacity? This is where the church, I think in America particularly, has to start changing its mentality away from the sort of the sort of Western thinking of make disciples of all nations as this great commission of going and leaving your space to go do things. And it needs to start to recognize like making disciples can happen in your very neighborhood, right? And that's where the Church of America is missing out, and we need to get better. And again, if I'm a leader, I was like, I just don't know how to do that. Well, we told you, well, part of that is and showing my churches, you got to help them learn about the cultures that are there, all right, and find out, some of the most beautiful things I've ever learned about culture, I've learned from other Christians from that culture. They help me understand more about the cultural values and things, but they also help me understand how does the gospel intersect the narrative of that culture most efficiently. Mm-hmm. And so that's been a really great thing. And so again, that's part of training people to understand that, but also just teaching them that these people have value, that they are actually people who are valuable and who are loved by God, and that if you love the people, you will find yourself engaging with some of their problems differently. But if you only love the problem, then you'll be approaching the people incorrectly.
Yeah.
So that's those are the pieces. So we've got, again, there's this mission piece that we have to see and engage. we say, hey, I already know I'm a leader. I already know how to do that. So I already know what that means. I'm in on that. I just need to know how to do it. Great. We just talked about some things from a strategy standpoint. I think another thing that that I hear leaders talking about to some extent is like almost like for themselves, it's like leadership gaps in the process, right? They themselves, and maybe we talked a little bit about this just in the last section, right? They don't feel that they are equipped or skilled, right? There's a competency problem.
Yeah.
In that particular, is that, I mean,
yeah. And that assumes that there's people who's listening, maybe they got to the end of this, but they're like, hey man, I'm in on all of that. Antwuan, I don't need an adjustment in my, in my ideology around that. I need a strategic piece. And I don't know if I have the skill set to
even once you get the strategy,
or even if I have the skill set, you, the leader, have the skill set. One person doesn't change culture, but a whole series of leaders actually change culture. How do I not only give myself this competency, but how do I develop an environment or create an environment where the development of those skills and competencies are regular and normal for our leadership at every level? Yeah, I think that's a legitimate question that people have as we try to figure out, like, what does it actually look like to do this ministry work on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that there are some very, tried and true, proven out competencies that we see of people who are going to be really good and effective in this work. Mm-hmm. I know it's one of the things that we try to help, train people in. Those who've engaged with Threaded know we have a cohort that we do, and really that cohort is really building competencies into these leaders so that they can do this work really well. We talk about in terms of, they've got to be mission minded, right? They have to understand what the mission of God is. We've already talked about that. And so because if they understand the mission of God and what God is trying to do, then when they're looking at their mission statements and the phrases that they use regularly, they go, does this actually communicate the mission of God, or is it just kind of a mission of my church, right? So they need to be mission minded. So we help people think about through that. We also help them be justice ready. We talked a little bit about that just a second ago. A lot of folks want to just go and do action, right? But they may not actually be ready to do that. And so there's some work that needs to happen. Some people don't even know what biblical justice even is. They're just working off of the social constructs of what justice looks like. And that's not going to be helpful for what God is asking to do when he says to do justice.
That's what's creating the edges.
Yeah, exactly. So we need to be justice ready. Because we have all these divides, people need to be skilled at peacemaking and reconciliation. Like there's real tools to trying to make peace, not just keep peace, right? Or peace faking, right? It's peacemaking, and there's work that needs to be done. But there's tools that need to be learned and how to do that really well that you can incorporate, not just out in the community. You can do it interpersonally, but also communal reconciliation tools that need to be had. People need to be culturally intelligent, which we've mentioned multiple times, right? Like we are in an environment where we've got all this diversity that's around us in the American church, and it's going to only grow more and more diverse. Well, we need to be intelligent in how to engage the different cultures that are coming, understand where their values are, and understand the strategy to engage them well so that they feel loved and engaged. We need to be historically astute. Again, that's where we're talking about learning. Like so much of what's happening is people trying to take away history. So we got to work really hard to sustain and preserve the history in the midst of what's going on. I know there are some cultures that do that really well, but not everybody does that well. In fact, I always laugh, when I was growing up, the history teacher was usually the football coach. You know what I'm saying?
True.
And he was like, coach. read the book, like whatever the text is, this is what you read. And that text was coming from Texas.
Fill in the paperwork.
Yeah. Like there wasn't like a really deep understanding of how does this history actually impact how we do things today? And what does that look like? So you got to be historically astute and understand that stuff. And then lastly, I think one of the things that the church doesn't do really well that we would think is a really key thing for a competency for someone who's in this work is they have to be effective collaborators, right? Like the things that are going on in this community are not going to get done by one person, nor are they going to get done by one church or one organization, but we're going to have to learn how to collaborate with each other for these bigger problems. And that's something that in my experience, I've not seen the churches really open to do. Not only I think they'll collaborate to some extent with some community organizations about how can they pour into those community organizations, but they don't see the community organizations as having anything for them to learn and engage in. And then churches connecting, collaborating together cross-culturally. Come on, bro. Yeah. Like that is the only reason I see that now is because that's what we do, right? That's kind of the work we do. Yeah. But it's not something. So you got to learn and help people. And part of they don't do it not because they don't think it's important. They don't know how to. We've not taught, and seminary does not teach you that, right? Yeah. We're still working off of the the model of the homogenous unit principle in some places, you know what I mean? Where they're like, I can't collaborate because you'll be taking my specific person that I'm trying to go after, right? So
niche.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the places that I think would be helpful if
I mean, and if you're sitting here listening, like, man, he just listed those are all really great measurements for skills, right? You're saying, hey, I don't have the competency. Well, first of all, you got to identify what are the competencies that I need, right? Yeah. So he just listed out a series of skills. And then now you may be thinking, well, that's a lot of stuff. I don't know how I would do that. And here's what I would offer to you. I would say that most of the times, we would all agree that Jesus spoke and taught in parable, right? The reason he was able to speak in parable is because he had the understanding of all this, right? He understood the history. He understood the people. He could use the Good Samaritan because he understood the history of Jews and Samaritans. And he could use that history to make a point, right? To help them understand what it is that it means to love the kingdom way in light of the cultural narrative they were living in. He understood the history. He understood those things. So it may look like that it's just an example. Jesus spoke in parables because parable is the shorthand of cultural teaching in some ways, because it is the proof that you understand the culture, that you could pull a story out to make a point, means that you probably have some level of proximity, missional connectedness, and these various types of things. So before you dismiss these things as things that feel like, again, ancillary or extra or unnecessary, it's quite possible that giving your people this type of knowledge allows them to be used by God in a whole different way, makes access to them, makes access to speaking and living with each other easier to engage, and allows for the connection to be made more fully. The second thing I would say, and then we're going to wrap up here probably in just a second, is leadership is to ask yourself the question of the layers, right? You're asking, hey, I mentioned a minute ago, like, hey, I don't have the competencies. So maybe you want to pursue these measurements or some other measurements of competencies that you believe you and your leadership team should have. But I would ask you to continue to push the question through to say, does every layer of our leadership have that? Is it from the elders to the senior leadership, to the staff, to any of your ministry leaders, even down to, say, your group leaders or your mentors and facilitators of conversations? Or is every layer of leadership and influence in position to be used by God in a cross-cultural discipleship way? And do they have the skills to navigate the first one or two layers of that interaction? And if they don't have it, then you probably don't have a very strong culture to lean into. So ask the question, in what way is every layer of leadership prepared to minister in this way? And what does it mean then to develop the sort of things needed, the sort of training and development tools and mechanisms and resourcing? What does it mean to get those leaders to the place where they are? Once you have that at every leader, then you now have the possibility of having cross-cultural and multicultural group experiences that aren't just zoos, but are actually communities where people don't just find things interesting about each other, but actually love each other for the difference that is revealed in their culture, right? And together decide to go forward in discipleship journey with Christ. And not just at the group level, but at the ministry level. All of a sudden, your high school ministry is thinking differently. Your young adult ministries are thinking differently. Your men's ministries are thinking differently, right? Because all those spaces have within them, baked into them, a readiness for cross-cultural engagement, cross-cultural ministry engagement, not because it's socially beneficial, but because it's what true discipleship actually is.
Yeah, and it's something that is in many ways, I'm not going to say unavoidable, but unavoidable. Again, if and I'm hesitating on this, right? Because what has been said is, 2042, America becomes majority minority. And here's the thing: it has nothing to do with immigration. It's just birth. It's literally like you could put make America a greenhouse, or just put a top on America and never do anything, let anybody in, right? And that's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. And if we go back to this commission of make disciples of all nations, what that means is that the nations are going to be in our midst. And if you're a church who is a homogenous church, the people in your church, maybe they keep coming. The next generation is not interested in just coming to a homogenous space. So you're aging out. You're managing decline of your church if this is not happening. And so you can wait for it, I guess. You can just be like, you know what? I'm at the end of my ministry. I'm just going to kind of manage decline on the way out. Or you can prep your church now to be ready for what is inevitably coming. And I would say not inevitably coming in the sense of, oh my gosh, what a terrifying thing, but like, what an exciting thing that the nations are coming and we might be able to experience this diversity from Revelation 7:9. How do you prepare your church to take part in that blessing?
Yeah.
Right. And that's what also the mindset is that I need to know how to do this, not only so that I can have enough people in my church. We need to know how to do this so that we can experience this thing that God seems to think is so valuable and important, this diversity inside of the church. Right?
Yeah.
So,
and it's just a recognition that the ministry context is changing.
Yes.
Like the assignment, if you want to ministry, the context,
the assignment is the same.
The assignment's the same, but who it is and how it's who is to, and the details of the assignment slightly shifting.
That's right.
It's if God is bringing people of all these different to our backyard, then how we minister to those people, the assignment is shifting, or we could say it's expanding.
It's becoming it's actually it's expanding the opportunity that we have to live into the fullness of what God's mission is.
So in some ways, if you're asking them, man, what does it look like to be the church in 2020 and 2020? Well, it's not 2020.
2025.
2025.
Boy, where have you been?
More than likely, I was been asleep for the last 4 years. Not sleep. Yeah, but no, and more than likely, what that means for you, especially as you start to look forward into the future, what that's going to mean for you is your church needs to be in position to minister to and be a missionary to the people who are 4 or 5 miles away from you, and those people are completely. It's a whole different contextual population context than it was before. And that requires us to look differently at what it means to be local missionaries, not as a department, but just as individuals.
Yeah,
people.
Let me just say one thing on that too. Like, yes, we have to be ready to minister to them, but we also have to be ready to be ministered to.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of the biggest pieces that I think
100%.
we have from a church standpoint is we think that we are the only ones who are bringing out something that's of value, and we're not, right? Like there's lots to learn and engage from people who are outside of our church context, our cultural context, our national context. We are a beloved community, and we've got a lot of folks that God has made in His image, and God has uniquely downloaded what the Bible calls the glory, right? The treasures from the different parts of the world. When He gave us the cultural mandate to fill the earth and subdue it, He was sending people in different directions so that they could discover something interesting and different about Him in those places, and then be drawn back together to bring all of that together so that the puzzle is put together, the tapestry is finished. So right now, in your homogeneity, you are holding a piece of the puzzle but you're missing out on being fully a part of the image of God by putting your puzzle next to others and receiving the blessing of that. So, I look, that's quintessentially why we call ourselves Colored Commentary, right? What we're pushing for in just even that last sort of little piece that I said is this recognition that the lenses that we look through are limited. And therefore, we need other lenses so that we can truly understand ourselves, the world around us, and God. And so I'm grateful that we're able to have this conversation. Obviously, there's leaders out there. If you're looking to get into this conversation a little bit more, this is what we do at Threaded. So go to wearethreaded.org, and you'll be able to engage with us and find the tools, the resources, the ways in which we come alongside churches. We consult with churches to help them walk through these processes. There's more questions leaders are asking. We just got to 3 of them. There's more that we're doing. If you are a leader, and whenever this one comes out, if you have not heard of the Mosaic Conference, we're going to be at the Mosaic Conference quite a bit. We'd love to see you there. It's November 11th through the 13th in the Dallas area at Tree Bible Fellowship in Dallas. Come check it out. It's a great place for churches, student leaders who are having these conversations and wanting to know how do they maneuver through this and all these and dealing with some of these obstacles. So we'll be there. We got breakouts. I think I'll be on stage for a little bit. It's going to be a good time, but this is what Color Commentary is trying to push into.
I guess we could probably say this, right? This is a pre-conference that we're going to do that's about this, and we're going to spend several hours talking about this with leaders. So we spent 55 minutes so far, kind of hitting the top tier of it. But there's an expansion of it, highly practical tools for you to come in and again for 2 hours in 2 hour blocks. They're 2 hours at a time potentially. But there's plenty of time for us to sit down, look at your church, and really get to the nitty gritties of what responding to this moment could look like for your church.
And send your way with some action, like an action plan.
With some, with a
playbook.
With a playbook, or some real plays that maybe you can begin to run. That's really contextual to who you are and what your church is actually trying to do.
That's right. So for the rest of us out there, take that into consideration and remember to be practicing this yourself, to looking through these different lenses. Right, that is the essence. So why we talk about Color Commentary, being able to see the world through different lenses, and it's why we at the end of the show we always tell you to stay colored.